Buddhism Without Beliefs, Stephen Batchelor, A Contemporary Guide to Awakening. It's the second to last chapter, which is entitled Imagination. And we get a quote from Richard Rorty, which reads, "A talent for speaking differently, rather than for arguing well, is the chief instrument of cultural change." Batchelor states, "To dwell in unknowing perplexity before the breath, the rain, a chair, is much the same as dwelling in unknowing perplexity before an unformed lump of clay, a blank sheet of paper, an empty computer screen. In both cases, we find ourselves hovering on the cusp between nothing and something, formlessness and form, inactivity and activity. We are poised in a still, vital alertness on the threshold of creation, waiting for something to emerge that has never happened in quite that way before and will never happen in quite that way again. Again, we are poised in a still vital alertness on the threshold of creation, waiting for something to emerge that has never happened in quite that way before and will never happen in quite that way again. And in both cases, we tremble on that fine line between exhilaration and dread. A mediator can be simultaneously enraptured by the intrinsic freedom of reality and unnerved by the symmetry-breaking cascade of experience about to burst forth in the next moment. Potters or writers can be enthralled by the endless creative possibilities of each moment, but paralyzed by their hesitation to realize even one of them. Just as the mediator flees to the safety of a consoling memory or fantasy, so the artist races out to get another cup of coffee. We could decide simply to remain absorbed in the mysterious, unformed, free play of reality. This would be the choice of the mystic who seeks to extinguish himself in God or nirvana, analogous perhaps to the tendency among artists to obliterate themselves with alcohol or opiates. But if we value our participation in a shared reality in which it makes sense to make sense, then such self-abnegation would deny a central element of our humanity, the need to speak and act, to share our experience with others. Freedom entails responsibility. Freedom from self-centered craving is freedom to creatively realize the possibilities of the world for others. When understanding and compassion are two sides of the same coin, an authentic vision of the empty and contingent nature of things spontaneously seeks to reflect itself in concrete and vivid forms of life. Face to face with the world, we struggle to find concepts, images, and ideas through which to express the awesome inexpressibility of reality in authentic speech and acts. This unformed vision strives for form through imagination. As an experience of freedom, awakening does not provide us with a set of ready-made ideas or images, let alone philosophical or religious doctrines. By its very nature, awakening is free from the constraints of preconceived ideas, images, and doctrines. It offers no answers, only the possibility of new beginnings. In expressing it, we no more translate concealed esoteric knowledge into wise utterances than a writer transposes fully formed sentences hidden in his mind onto paper. Ideas and words emerge through the very process of expressing them to an actual or implied audience. Ideas and words emerge through the very process of expressing them to an actual or implied audience. They might come as a surprise, a shock, even to the person who articulates them. They do not arrive fully formed any more than a daffodil arrives fully formed from a sprouting bulb. They arise from an unrepeatable matrix of contingencies. The authenticity of our own vision and compassion in that moment, the needs of others in a particular time and place, our skill in using available technical and cultural resources. Dharma practice is more akin to artistic creation than technical problem solving. The technical dimension of Dharma practice, such as training to be more mindful and focused, is comparable to the technical skills a potter must learn in order to become proficient in their craft. Both may require many years of discipline and hard work. Yet for both, such expertise is only a means, not an end in itself. Just as technical proficiency in pottery is no guarantee of beautiful pots, so technical proficiency in meditation is no guarantee of a wise or compassionate response to anguish. The art of Dharma practice requires commitment, technical accomplishment, and imagination. As with all arts, we will fail to realize its full potential if any of these three is lacking: commitment, technical accomplishment, and imagination. The raw material of Dharma practice is ourself and our world, which are to be understood and transformed according to the vision and values of the Dharma itself. This is not a process of self or world transcendence, but one of self and world creation. The denial of self challenges only the notion of a static self, independent of body and mind, not the ordinary sense of ourself as a person distinct from everyone else. This notion of a static self is the primary obstruction to the realization of our unique potential as an individual being. By dissolving this fiction through a centered vision of the transiency, ambiguity, and contingency of experience, we are freed to create ourselves anew. The notion of the world as an alien reality composed of stubborn, discrete things is likewise the primary obstruction to world creation. Again, the notion of the world as an alien reality composed of stubborn, discrete things is likewise the primary obstruction to world creation. In dissolving this view through a vision of the world as a dynamic and interrelated whole of which we are an integral part, we are likewise freed to engage with the world afresh. To realize such visions requires acts of imagination. No matter how deeply we understand the transient and empty nature of existence, how vividly we experience the intrinsic freedom of reality, how passionately we long to appease the anguish of others. If we cannot imagine forms of life that respond effectively to the situation at hand, we will be limited in what we can do. Again, to realize such visions requires active imagination. If we cannot imagine forms of life that respond effectively to the situation at hand, we will be limited in what we can do. Instead of finding a voice that speaks to the unique contingencies of our situation, we repeat the clichés and dogmas of other epochs. Instead of creatively participating in a contemporary culture of awakening, we confine ourselves to preserving those cultures of a vanishing past. Self-creation entails imagining ourselves in other ways. Instead of thinking of ourselves as a fixed nugget in a shifting current of mental and physical processes, we might consider ourselves as a narrative that transforms these processes into an unfolding story. Life becomes less of a defensive stance to preserve an immutable self and more of an ongoing task to complete an unfinished tale. As a coherent narrative, our identity's integrity is maintained without having to assume an unmoving metaphysical center around which everything else turns. Grounded in awareness of transiency, ambiguity, and contingency, such a person values lightness of touch, flexibility and adaptability, a sense of humor and adventure, appreciation of other viewpoints, a celebration of difference. As soon as the imagination is activated in the process of awakening, we recover the aesthetic dimension of Dharma practice. The cultivation of focused awareness, for example, cannot be adequately understood as a set of cognitive and affective transformations alone, because such awareness is also an experience of beauty. As the turmoil of consciousness subsides and we come to rest in a heightened clarity of attention, the natural beauty of the world is vividly enhanced. We marvel at the exquisite tracery of a leaf, the play of light against the bark of a tree, the reflections and ripples in a puddle of water, the deliquescent radiance of a human eye. Deliquescent meaning having a tendency to become liquid. Our appreciation of the arts is also enriched. A phrase of music, a line of poetry, a dancing figure, a penciled sketch, a clay vase may speak to us with unprecedented poignancy and depth. Great works of art in all cultures succeed in capturing, within the constraints of their form, both the pathos of an anguish and a vision of its resolution. Take, for example, the languorous sentences of Proust or the haiku of Basho, the late quartets and sonatas of Beethoven, the tragicomic brushwork of Sengai, or the daunting canvases of Rothko, the luminous self-portraits of Rembrandt and Hakoun. Such works achieve their resolution not through consoling or romantic images whereby anguish is transcended. They accept anguish without being overwhelmed by it. They reveal anguish as that which gives beauty its dignity and depth. They reveal anguish as that which gives beauty its dignity and depth. The four ennobling truths of the Buddha provide not only a paradigm of cognitive and affective freedom, but a template for aesthetic vision. Any work of art that deepens our understanding of anguish moves us to relax the constrictions of self-centered craving, reveals the dynamic play of emptiness and form, and inspires a way of life conducive to such ends, bears the hallmark of authentic beauty. And just as non-Buddhist works can have such an effect, so explicitly Buddhist works can fail to do so. The same aesthetic vision inspires the imaginative tasks of self and world creation. The ennobling truths are not just challenges to act with wisdom and compassion, but challenges to act with creativity and aesthetic awareness. Our words, our deeds, our very presence in the world create and leave impressions in the minds of others, just as a writer makes impressions with his pen on paper, the painter with his brush on canvas, the potter with his fingers in clay. The human world is like a vast musical instrument on which we simultaneously play our part while listening to the compositions of others. The creation of ourself in the image of awakening is not a subjective, but an intersubjective process. The creation of ourself in the image of awakening is not a subjective, but an intersubjective process. We cannot choose whether to engage with the world, only how to. Our life is a story being continuously related to others through every detail of our being, facial expressions, body language, clothing, inflections in speech, whether we like it or not. After his awakening, the Buddha spent several weeks hovering on the cusp between the rapture of freedom and, in his words, the vexation of engagement. Should he remain in the peaceful state of nirvana or share with others what he had discovered? What decided him was the appearance of an idea, in the language of ancient India, a god, that forced him to recognize the potential for awakening in others and his responsibility to act. As soon as his imagination was triggered, he relinquished the mystical option of transcendent absorption, Pratyeka Buddha, and moved to engage with the world, Bodhisattva. Thus, the Buddha set out on a path that started from a vision, was translated through ideas into words and actions, and gave rise to cultures of awakening that continue to inspire today. This development is analogous to the process of creativity, which likewise starts from an unformed vision and is translated through the imagination into cultural forms. The course of the Buddha's life offers a paradigm of human existence, which has been realized in diverse forms throughout Asia over the past 2,500 years. The genius of the Buddha lay in his imagination. He succeeded in translating his vision not only into the language of his time, but into terms sufficiently universal to inspire future generations in India and beyond. His ideas have survived in much the same way as great works of art. While we may find certain stylistic elements of his teaching alien, his central ideas speak to us in a way that goes beyond their reference to a particular place or time. But unlike ancient statues from Egypt or Gandhara, the wheel of Dharma set in motion by the Buddha continued to turn after his death, generating ever new and startling cultures of awakening. Each time the Dharma moved into a different civilization or historical period, it faced a twofold challenge: to maintain its integrity as an internally coherent tradition, and to express its vision in a way that responded to the needs of the new situation. In order to make sense, it had to imagine itself in original and unexpected ways. Compare the Pali Discourses, a collection of Zen koans, and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. While this gradual process of transformation occurred over several generations, it was invariably crystallized through the genius of a single person, or at most a handful of individuals. The genius of these people lay also in their imagination, their capacity to express an authentic vision of the Dharma in a way that responded creatively to the needs of their particular situations. They initiated distinctive cultures of awakening that generated original and abundant outpourings of philosophy, literature, and art. Yet these periods of cultural vitalization did not tend to last long. For while the founding figures were imaginative and creative, imagination and creativity were rarely qualities encouraged in the schools and orders they established. The very terms imagination and creativity lack exact equivalents in classical Buddhist languages. As their traditions grew into powerful religious institutions, the preservation of orthodoxy became the main priority. While originating in acts of imagination, orthodoxies paradoxically seek to control the imagination as a means of maintaining their authority. The authenticity of a person's understanding is measured according to its conformity with the dogmas of the school. While such controls may provide a necessary safeguard against charlatanism and self-deception, they can also be used to suppress authentic attempts at creative innovation that might threaten the status quo. The imagination is anarchic and potentially subversive. The more hierarchic and authoritarian a religious institution, the more it will require that the creations of the imagination conform to its doctrines and aesthetic norms. Yet by suppression of the imagination, the very life of Dharma practice is cut off at its source. while religious orthodoxies may survive and even prosper for centuries, in the end they will ossify. When the world around them changes, they will lack the imaginative power to respond creatively to the challenges of the new situation. Again, while religious orthodoxies may survive and even prosper for centuries, in the end they will ossify. When the world around them changes, they will lack the imaginative power to respond creatively to the challenges of the new situation. The quote reading, a talent for speaking differently, rather than for, again, a talent for speaking differently, rather than for arguing well, is the chief instrument of cultural change. Richard Rorty. And that was the chapter on imagination in Stephen Batchelor's Buddhism Without Beliefs, a Contemporary Guide to Awakening.